Hi everyone. I know you're reading about Tomie DePaola this week, and I found this book at my house. It's not written by Tomie DePaola, but it is illustrated by him, and it's called The Quilt Story. I'm also going to be making a lot of connections as I read this book. Some text to self, text to text connections. One connection I can already make before I even start reading is I noticed that the pictures in this book kind of remind me of the pictures in other Tomie DePaola books I've read, like Stregonona. The way that it's illustrated reminds me a lot of that book. A little girl's mother made the quilt to keep her warm when the snow came down long ago. She stitched the quilt by a yellow flame, humming all the time. She stitched the tails of falling stars, and she stitched the name Abigail. So I can already make a text-to-self connection because the main character's name is Abigail, and my first name is Abigail. You know me as Mrs. Marchant, but my friends and family call me Abigail. Abigail loved the quilt. She wrapped it round her in the quiet dark and watched the winter skies. Sometimes she saw a falling star. Sometimes Abigail played in the woods near her home. She had tea, her dolls had tea, and the quilt had tea all over it. Sometimes she pretended the quilt was a gown. She wore it to town on her horse. Clop, 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 and it tore. So her mother stitched it up once more. Sometimes she played hide and seek with her sisters. She laughed and cried, "Don't peek," and hid under the quilt, and everyone found her. Sometimes Abigail was sick. She sneezed and sneezed, then she slept under the quilt and she felt better. This kind of reminds me of my blankie that I had growing up, or maybe you have a special blanket or a stuffed animal, and maybe that made you feel better when you were sick, or just sleeping with it made you feel better. It seems like that's what the quilt is to Abigail. One day, Abigail's family moved away across wide rivers and over a rock-hard trail. The quilt went too. Not stuffed in trunks with the blankets and clothes, it kept the little girls warm from the wild winds, warm from the rain, warm from the sparkling nights. They built a new house in the woods. Abigail's father built it with his hatchet. Chop, chop, chop. He built her a new bed. Chip, chip, chip. He made her a new horse, too. He worked until curly shavings covered the floor and everyone sneezed and said, "Welcome home," and was glad. And Abigail felt sad. New house, new horse, new bed. Everything smelled of fresh chops and chips. Everything but the quilt. So her mother rocked her as mothers do, then tucked her in, and Abigail felt at home again under the quilt. One day, when the quilt was very old and very loved, Abigail folded it carefully and put it in the attic. Everyone forgot it was there. A gray mouse came and loved the quilt. Her babies were born on top of it. They grew fat and gray in the warm stuffing. When they got hungry, they ate a falling star. They don't mean a real falling star, they mean this star. A raccoon came and loved the quilt. She dug a hole in a corner with her black paws and hid an apple there. I'm making another text-to-text connection. of the story, The Mitten. Has anyone read that story, The Mitten? It's by Jan Brett, and it's about a mitten that a bunch of animals use and go in to find warmth in the winter. And it's kind of reminding me of that, how all these animals are using this quilt for their own purposes. A cat came and loved the quilt, a patchwork cat. It rolled on the stars, and stuffing spilled out like snow. Then the cat curled up in the snow and purred. Kitty, kitty, called a little girl. She found her cat, and she found the quilt, splashed with patterns of sun. Now this is a different girl than the girl before. She found the quilt. This was the first girl. This is the new girl. And she found it in the attic with her cat. The little girl wrapped the quilt round her, and she loved it too. Can you make it like new? She asked her mother. So her mother patched the holes, she pushed fresh stuffing in, she stitched long tails on the stars to swish across the quilt again. Wow, I'm almost making a connection from here to the beginning of the book. Both of the girls love the quilt, and their moms fix the quilt for them when it's ripped. But now it has a new home. One day, the little girl's family moved away across miles and miles of pavement and snaking gray highways. They found a new house, freshly cleaned, freshly waxed, freshly painted white. Does this remind anyone else of when the other girl moved? They unpacked and unpacked all night, and everyone sneezed on cardboard dust and said, "Welcome home," and was glad. And the little girl felt sad. Everything smelled of white paint and boxes. Everything but the quilt. So her mother rocked her, as mothers do, then tucked her in, and she felt at home again under the quilt. And that's the end. And there's the quilt. I hope you liked that story. I really enjoyed it. I love the way the story was similar with the first girl and the new girl who found the quilt. It makes me think about things that I have that are special, that make me feel better when I'm not feeling too well or I'm feeling a little down. So I challenge you to think about in your head, what are some things you have that provide you with comfort? Maybe it's a blankie or a stuffed animal. Could be even a pet, but I think that's something interesting to think about. And for those two girls, it was the quilt. So thanks for listening.